Next week, we have a banned and restricted announcement coming up as Wizards revealed at the end of Weekly MTG this week.
It's going to end. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. We will be back next week to talk about the BNR announcement. So there will be a BNR announcement on Monday of next week.
Exactly which formats will be affected by this banned and restricted announcement isn't clear, but I just want to talk about some ideas, some theories, some thoughts about the upcoming bans on Monday, if there are any. This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Use the code Kenobi at checkout to get 5% off your order, and every order right now gets a free foil with it as well, including some potentials for you to pick up some sweet promos if you're one of the lucky winners. I've been playing a lot of Modern recently up until an RCQ last weekend where I did abysmally average at 6-7, I think was my result across 13 rounds. It wasn't good. Turns out when you expect to blow up ley lines, but then you just play against loading the cattles, you lose. My 1-2s and 2-2s weren't good into 3-3s, 4-4s, and 5-5s. But ultimately, Modern is fun right now. I've been enjoying it, playing a bit of D&T, playing a bit of Slogurt. I do think some decks are a bit too good. The most powerful decks in the format do feel kind of absurd. But what you've got to remember about Modern right now is that Modern Horizons 3 releases on the 7th of June. It's really close. Well, it's only a couple months away, but so that they could make changes, but I assume they're just going to let the format like shake out. We've only had massive shakeups with Leyline of the Guild Pact just now with Mark of Mana. We then got Thunder Junction, then Modern Horizons 3. So it feels like a safe spot to let the format sort of like grow and evolve over the next couple of months until we have a massive shake-up with Modern Horizons 3. Also, I haven't talked about the previous Modern Horizons 3 yet. That video will be out after this one, perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, maybe Monday. It's a bit late, but I wasn't in a rush to talk about it. I had other things on. But that said, if we're looking at Modern, one of the key players that could get banned is Violent Outburst, a 3-mana instant cascade spell which pumps the front end of your team, which is largely irrelevant. This card sees play in primarily Living End and Rhinos, the two cascade decks of the format, and the reason it's a good part of it is A, it gives them more cascaders to play. There are other sorcery ones they can play in place of this, like is it Ardent Plea? Either way, this is the one of choice alongside Shardless Agent at the moment. The reason this one is the best one in the deck over Shardless Agent is the instant speed interaction. It means you can flash in and your opponent's end step to untap with essentially hasty Rhinos, but on top of that, it also allows you to protect Violent Outburst with Force of Negation, which is only free in your opponent's turn. That way, if you cast Violent Outburst in your opponent's turn and they try to interact with it through, let's say, a Spell Pierce, for example, you can Force of Negate that spell for free by pitching a card from hand, and then you now have 8 power in play. Ultimately, I think both of the Cascade decks are a bit too good right now. With Living End being able to rely on Grief, which I'll talk about in a moment, I think that free interaction spells like Force Negation and Grief protecting a singular card combo. And what I mean by that is you don't need to have the other card in hand or on board. You simply cast one Cascader and then you hit either Rhinos or Living End and perform your combo that way. At least Living End has to fill the bin and there's an interaction point there. So if any Cascade spell is going to get hit or any way to hit the Cascade decks, it's probably Violent Outburst. Then we have the Leyline of the Guild Pact, the most recent entry into the format, which will probably be given some more time to grow and for people to adjust to. I do have an issue with this card in a sense that the Leyline of the Guild Pact draws for both Domain Zoo and like Domain Rhinos or Rainbow Rhinos. Some of their best draws are Leyline, Scion on turn 2 into like, you know, more creatures, would that be Rhinos or Domain creatures or Zoo creatures. Either way, those draws are basically unwinnable for a large portion of the format. Even like the tier 2 decks just don't really get a look in when you have that kind of start. Now that is the nut draw, and I appreciate that it's not every game, but decks having this like almost borderline unbeatable start some percentage of the time isn't a good thing. And the nut draw here involves an enchantment plus creatures and creatures, so you kind of need to have the perfect storm of interaction. The main reason Leyline is so good in these situations is that Leyline of the Guild Pact plus Sign of Draco, as I mentioned in a video a couple weeks ago, turns your creatures hexproof, and thus having just creature removal doesn't do it. You have to first destroy the Leyline and then remove the creatures in some capacity if you have target removal, and thus you must have the perfect storm of interaction for their nut draw hand, and that's why it's so hard to interact with and win against. I quite comfortably beat Rhinos at the RCQ in game 1 and 3, but in game 2 they went Leyline into Scion of Draco into Rhinos and I just lost the game. Beyond that, Grief is a support card for the other Cascade deck in the format, Living End, which is basically a free look at your hand, rip something out of it, whilst putting a body into the bin that can then be living ended. The other side of this that really bugs me in terms of how it interacts with Living End is not only is it this free Thoughtseize earlier on by pitching a spell, then when it ETBs off of the Living End, it will often rip the interaction spell you have in hand, like a Supreme Verdict, for example, out of your hand. If Grief just did the second part of that on its own, like it was just a 4 or 5 mana creature that happened to do that out of the bin, that'd be okay. The fact that it performs interaction duty early on and later alongside the combo, whilst also being a free spell that allows you to use your mana for cycling spells on the turn that you're griefing as well, just feels a little bit egregious. I keep coming back to this idea that a 1-card combo deck shouldn't be allowed to protect itself or interact with the opponent for free. Essentially, I think all the pitch elementals are Garbo, and Grief is the most offensive after Fury. I do think Grief is still not as bad as Fury. I know I banged the drum about Fury before, and some people have sarcastically thanked me for getting Fury banned, and I'm like, no worries, friends, it should be gone, the card's a piece of shit. But Fury would often remove 1, 2, or 3 of your creatures from your board when trying to develop a board state against a Fury deck. Grief sometimes costs the opponent a 2-for-1 to remove 1 piece of interaction from your hand, which allows you to still progress with the game and move on and play other pieces. I feel like Grief is still less egregious than Fury, even with the hindsight of playing against Grief now that Fury is gone. And the last consideration on the docket, probably the weakest of the 4 cards that I'm going to mention as potential targets for bans, is the One Ring. This card is more a bias from me because this card has almost single-handedly made the Amulet matchup for D&T impossible to win. I lost so many games over the weekend of getting my opponent very low, then them time-warping me by getting protection from the ring, drawing a couple of cards off of it, and then winning off of the extra resources. The One Ring is obnoxiously good, but I don't think it really compares to the others. I just think it is a card that, when it's been manipulated by decks like Amulet, for example, does seem a little bit gross. Ultimately, I think Violent Outburst is the worst of these, and I think Leyline of the Guild Pack will just continue to be problematic as we move forward and will, interact with more things, although I guess they aren't going to print any more ludicrous domain spells like Leyline's Binding anytime soon. Beyond that, I don't really think that Legacy needs anything banned right now, but I haven't been playing the format a whole load. I know that Mind Goblin has caused some problems online, but I don't know if it's big enough or problematic enough to require a ban. For reasons I don't quite understand, our Legacy Reanimator is currently the boogeyman of the format. I've seen people talking about how this deck is kind of gross right now, winning challenges, regularly 5-0-ing, and just being a deck you have to be prepared for. I don't know what's made it better. Honestly, I really don't. I don't understand exactly what's changed in the metagame to make it so good, but I doubt they will ban anything to make Reanimator worse. It is playing Daze, which has been a thing that I've said in the past. That is a card that could go to make blue decks worse, but I just don't think that's going to happen here. Importantly, though, Daze is played in both Reanimator, one of the Grixis Tempo decks, and in Beanstalk Control, and Delver too. So, 4 of the top, 8 decks are playing Daze. That is a point to consider. Beyond that, Standard still has a bit of a shoulder problem as she's in Golgari midrange, Dimir midrange, and some versions of Esper midrange, and she's approaching $90. But there are plenty of decks that aren't playing her that are also valid, so her price tag is probably not the only reason you look to ban anything, so I think she's probably safe for now. And lastly, we had Pioneer as a Pro Tour format in which Rakdos Vampires won the actual Pro Tour with Sorin putting in a Vein Ripper off of its ability. Now, I don't think any of this stuff is going to be targeted for ban. It's probably too early days Pro Tour, although there is a problem with one of the combo decks. Supposedly, Amalia Benavides Acquire, I've just butchered that name, haven't I? But apparently this deck was leading to quite a few draws at the Pro Tour, so it might just be from a time-saving perspective that this might not be a combo they want to see played in Pioneer. But I'm going completely off vibes here from hearing people talk on the internet and just paying attention. I have not played much Pioneer, if any Pioneer, for 6 months, maybe a year. It was the last time I played a Pioneer match, so I can't really comment heavily upon it. I just thought it was interesting that there were draws at the Pro Tour where good players were struggling to end games in Amalia mirrors. So let me know if you think I've missed something, or if there's something you really want to see banned, or something that you don't want to see banned but you think is on the chopping block. Sometimes cards get banned that you don't agree with. The other option that's coming up that I shouldn't really try and sign off the video then jump to, so organized content creator. But the other option here is unbannings, whether Mox Opal or Splinter Twin season unbanning would be super fascinating and interesting. I think unbans could be quite exciting for Modern. But again, they probably all just pale in comparison to the current Cascade decks that are kind of ludicrous, especially with their pivotable turn 2 nonsense with fucking Scions of Draco. I'm not clambering for any bans, but I can understand if Violent Outburst got hit, and I'd love to see some unbans to play with some fan favourite Magic cards. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.